Looking at her who was now sitting in front of him while putting on a friendly smile, Hajin thought, Yun Sung-ah had a friendly impression in public, but her true nature was a little different. She would discard those who did not develop to her standards, even though she had put in a lot of effort to recruit them, an extreme mindset that was focused on getting the best. Yun Sung-ah was the deputy guildmaster of the best guild in this country. If he made a good relationship with Yun Sung-ah, it would definitely help him in the future, so. And when Yun Sung-ah said that she was curious as to what he was doing at, Hajin suddenly interrupted her and immediately said no, there was nothing he needed to tell her. Yun Sung-ah was stunned to hear that. She then said, she thought, there was a small misunderstanding between them. She showed interest in him, as the deputy guildmaster of the #1 guild in Korea. Hearing that, Hajin just said, her attention was good. If it's sincere, Hajin also thought, she probably approached him because she saw him using the light attribute attack. But he knew her interest in him was nothing but a little curiosity, so he thought that he should reject her a few times, so that her curiosity would grow until it became a real interest. Hajin then told her that he was leaving. Yun Sung-ah was then dumbfounded to see that, after arriving at his dormitory, he could now finally freely check the stigma. As an authority maker, this contained magic power. When he accumulated SP, his attention became over a certain limit, he would get a stigma mark. The magic stored in the stigma can be used based on Kim Hajin's wishes and slowly replenished after 24 hours. After reading that, Hajin then decided to try it. He then tried to turn the magic power in the stigma into a dagger form. The stigma mark on his wrist lit up brightly after its activation. It then turned into a dagger shape. Hajin was really amazed to see it work. He could use it just by thinking about it. Magic power is a stat that has a great influence on talent and early education. It would be impossible for him, who was just thrown into this world, to be able to use magic. He felt this was a relief because now he had a way to use it. The next thing he had to try was, Book of Truth. This was the last feature he got after the update. After reading the description of the Book of Truth, Hajin then tried it. He muttered, Book of Truth, and the stigma mark on his wrist then lit up again after that, then formed a book. It was the Book of Truth. After the book appeared, suddenly a voice came from his head. This book holds all the truth. It will answer all questions as much as the magic he has. Hajin was really surprised to hear this could answer everything. He then decided to try with a trivial question. He asked, how tall is he? The Book of Truth answered, his height is 174 centimeters. 1 SP was used for his question. It made Hajin finally know how it works, but his smartwatch suddenly lit up with a bright red color. Hajin was then shocked to see it. He knew this was an indication of an emergency alarm. After he opened it, a message then appeared. We are looking for the person who last saw Jin Haejong from the world class. Reading that, Hajin was silent for a moment. He then thought, so, it has started, the second main story. The Cube Missing People Incident. As seen from the title, during the episode, a total of 6 cadets disappeared, without any trace. The investigation became deadlocked, and the number of missing people increased rapidly. This episode is actually quite important, because the last target of the perpetrator is Yuna. If the co-writer makes him lose another protagonist ally like in the museum, it will be very bad. If so, Hajin thought he should find the culprit himself, but he then immediately abandoned his intention. If he intervened too early, the story would be completely messed up. He then decided to watch it first. At the practice field, students were seen practicing. After sipping the drink because he was thirsty, Kim Suho, who was also there, was then asked by his friend to look in the direction he was pointing. Hearing that, Kim Suho then looked in that direction. There was Hajin, who was being bullied by 2 people while going to practice. The 2 bullies asked him, what are you doing, loser? The 2 bullies insulted him for not being able to lift the barbell. They said that he had embarrassed the whole cube. They also asked, did he bribe his way in? Kim Suho certainly couldn't stay silent when he saw that, but when he was about to break up with them, he was then immediately restrained by his friend. His friend jokingly asked him not to interfere. Hearing that, Kim Suho then said to his friend that he should break them up as the class president, but his friend just said to leave them alone. He guessed, it seemed like that guy pissed off Shin Jonghak. It would be troublesome if he interfered. He also said, who knows, maybe it was just an act. Kim Suho was then dumbfounded to hear that. His friend continued, he himself said, he smashed the Jin's hand. Did he think something like this would make him angry at those fools? Hearing that made Kim Suho think that Kim Hajin was hiding his strength, but when they saw Hajin who was struggling just to lift a barbell, they then became uncertain. Seeing that, his friend then awkwardly continued, if beating the Jin wasn't a stroke of luck. Ignoring his friend's words again, Kim Suho then immediately came to break them up. All the cadets who were there then finally realized the commotion, but fortunately before the commotion became bigger, Kim Suhyuk then entered and scolded them, "What's all this commotion during training time?" He then told them all to gather. The written test results from before were out. He had marked them, so they could check their scores, and they checked their scores together, and to their surprise, at the very top was Kim Hajin's name. But Hajin was not surprised at all. He had expected this, but he was then surprised when he heard the sound of a rapier falling from behind him. When he looked back, he then saw Rachel, who was looking at the scoreboard with an expression of disbelief. Hajin recognized him, Rachel Elizabeth Louise, the Princess of England who came in third place in the cube exam. Besides that, whether big or small, she never failed to be ranked first in the written test, and as Rachel looked at him with a look of disbelief, Hajin could only be stunned. A little flashback when Rachel had just been accepted into the cube. Upon hearing the news, her servants then congratulated her. Her butler hoped that she would not be nervous standing among the world's greatest hero candidates. Her guards said that he had heard that all their classes contained only Koreans. Rachel smiled slightly at their worries. She then calmed them down and said that she would fight hard to achieve everyone's expectations, for the honor of the British royal family. When she recalled her promise, Rachel then silently apologized to them. She felt that she had disappointed them. In class, the teacher explained that Hajin's answer completely took a new view of phenomenon analysis. He hoped the other candidates would follow him as an example to improve. Hearing the teacher's explanation, Rachel then thought, phenomenon analysis is a difficult field, this gap will be difficult to narrow just by the middle exam. Rachel then glanced at Hajin, who was currently acting like a moron. She was curious as to what kind of way he used to study. She was really very fiery to compete with him at the moment. When returning to the dormitory, Hajin then opened the information broker. Truth, using his notebook. It was the site he had just created. He then thought that he should put useful abilities like the Book of Truth to good use like this, and in return, earn some pocket money. The Book of Truth allowed him to learn various information in this world as long as he had enough SP, because it didn't have enough credibility. He couldn't earn much, but as soon as word spread, customers would be booming, so, without much thought, he then applied for merchant registration. Next, SP investment, which he had neglected. The beginning of the second main story. This meant that the cube was no longer safe from Jin, setting intervention. Sharp shooting, Hajin thought. His current ability was not enough to deal with Jin, although it was thanks to Jonghak and his gang that oppressed him. He got more than enough SP to go around. He had to invest it to help him improve his survival skills. First, Hajin thought that he should upgrade his weapon. He then added a function change to the Desert Eagle. He changed it from a pistol to a sniper rifle. Seeing that, Hajin hoped that he didn't do anything stupid. The appearance of the Desert Eagle was now completely changed, after he added the function change to the weapon. The weapon was now officially a sniper rifle from a pistol. Hajin giggled when he saw the new look of the weapon. He thought, at least, he should be able to scare them with this. He then changed the sniper rifle's appearance back to a pistol so as not to take up too much space. Now, he should try to write mastery, unlike talent, which uses magic power to create a supernatural phenomenon. Mastery refers to the physical techniques or skills that one hones, for snipers, in order to survive and also kill. The most important ability is location selection. Mastery is useful for selecting locations. And Hajin then wrote the mastery. He wrote a mastery called parkour, low rank. It made his body movements flexible and agile. Instead of being limited by the obstacles around, he could use this to move. Its speed and usefulness were highly dependent on the strength and agility stat. 350 SP was consumed after he wrote the mastery, but Hajin didn't feel anything now. He hoped it was working. He was then surprised when a notification popped up from his smartwatch. When he opened it, a message then appeared. The sender asked if anyone had seen Sunjian from World Class. He hadn't been able to contact her since yesterday. Reading the message, Hajin realized that it was the second victim. All the cadets who were kidnapped before Yuna would be killed by the perpetrator. It made him doubt. Was it okay for him to just watch them disappear, even though he knew the culprit and the next victim? It made Hajin pensive deeply. It was already the next day when the sky was shining so brightly. at the outdoor training ground in the cube. Seeing the cadets who had gathered, Kim Soo-hyuk then asked if everyone was here. He then said that today's practice exercise was special. The cave behind them was an artificial dungeon, the peak of magic technology engineering. There are monster puppets made like real monsters in this artificial dungeon, and today, they will practice raiding in the dungeon using this artificial dungeon. But he told them not to let their guard down just because it's a practice. Now, in this unexpectedly large dungeon, the joint training between Veritas class and Cultivation class will take place. The team will be formed into groups based on each class. After announcing that, Kim Soo-hyuk then told them to go to the team that had been assigned to them now. Hearing that, they then immediately gathered with their team members, while Hajin himself was in Team 8. The team contained 4 cadets from the Veritas class, Yuna, Jin Ho-sung, Hazuki, and herself, and 4 from the Cultivation class, Jaden, Kim Jin-yu, Oh Soo-jong, and Lee Jin-xiao. While looking towards the entrance of the artificial dungeon, Hajin thought, there are many types of traps and deaths lurking inside this artificial dungeon. Some of the traps were even made by Jin, just in case. He even made some bullets with attributes, but he was a little doubtful whether he could safely complete this exercise. But a notification suddenly appeared. There was a change of flow. Hajin was then surprised to see that, because it was not just 1, but 3 at once. He then anxiously asked who changed, and how. He was very anxious about the sudden change. And when Kim Soo-ho was just silent, his team members then came to him and scolded him. Did he not hear that they had to gather immediately? She asked, was he Kim Soo-ho? He looked slow. Kim Soo-ho could only be silent hearing that. He was Jo Yuna from the Cultivation class. A notification then appeared. Jo Yuna's character trait had been made more aggressive than the original. A member of her team then came to Yuna and shook hands with her, with a familiar style. He hoped that they could get along as a team, and maybe after this exercise. Yuna was really sick of seeing that. He was Jaden from the Cultivation class. Jaden's character potential increased by 0.5, and when Chae Nayun was approached by her team member, she then asked if he was also on her team. She saw that he was from the hunting class, and when she was about to ask his name, the person then introduced himself. His name was Sven. At this time, a notification also appeared. Sven's character's mental strength was weakening. Most likely, he would be taken by the demon pawn. Hearing the several rings of the notification, Hajin was really shocked. This was not just a small change, this was called a big change. After looking carefully, there were 2 people he had to watch out for. The first was Jaden from Team 8. He was an arrogant bastard who always looked down on people weaker than him. He was strong enough to be recruited by the essence of the straight. He was really confused why his growth potential suddenly increased. Jaden then introduced himself and his team members to them. Yuna also introduced herself and her team to them. But she misspelled Kim Hajin's name to Lee Hajin. Hajin was then annoyed to hear that. After he watched Jaden for a moment, he then thought that he might not be suspicious. The second was Sven from Team 3, a student from Germany. He was also a shining hero candidate in his country. The important feature of him was, he liked Chae Nayun. Like other foreign students, Sven entered the cube while dreaming of reaching the top. But the reality was not that easy. In the face of the monstrous skills of other cadets, he was just one of the ordinary cadets. The weakness and defeat he felt for the first time in his life, coupled with the instability of puberty. As a result, Sven sold his soul to Jin to get stronger. It was the same as he had written. But the problem was that the part about his time in the dungeon, his awakening had happened earlier. He hoped it wouldn't affect the story too much, but while he was busy pondering that, Jaden suddenly came up to him while grasping his shoulder tightly. He asked, "You're that sharpshooter, right?" He asked him not to daydream in the dungeon like this. Seeing him with a familiar look, Hajin then immediately dismissed his hand, and told him to get lost. Jaden chuckled at that. He also said, "It turns out he's not a good person, huh? It's appropriate that there are many rumors about him." Hajin was really very annoyed when he heard that. Lately, people looked down on him. It was because there were some rumors that spread from the world class. The rumors said Kim Hajin used his position as a cube cadet to blackmail and threaten people. And every weekend he went to Seoul to enjoy all kinds of moral decadence. The source of the rumors was clear from whom, but thanks to that, he got a lot of SP. He could only sigh helplessly because there was no one to defend him now. Weren't they a team? A few moments later, Kim Soo-hyuk then announced the start of training. He then told them to enter. Starting from Team 1, Jaden then returned to Yuna and said, He heard that she might become rank 1 support among all cadets. Hearing that, Yuna replied, she had also heard many things about him. She was curious how unbalanced this team was. This was too favorable for them. Hearing that, Jaden just said, while you get someone great, you also get someone useless. Hajin then got annoyed hearing that. He knew that he was insinuating himself, until finally, it was their team's turn to enter the dungeon. When they entered, a very dark cave environment was then presented in front of them. As they continued to walk forward, they were then faced with the first obstacle in the dungeon. The obstacle turned out to be a branching path. Seeing that, Yuna then asked, where should they go? Jaden said. Jingyu was the sharpshooter in their team, but before he could even finish his words, Hajin said, the 6th, he then invited them to go to the 6th branch. Jaden was then annoyed that his words were interrupted. He asked, who did he think he was? Yuna was silent for a moment. She then agreed with Hajin. Hajin was then surprised to hear that. She said, he may look shabby, but his eyes are quite sharp. Hearing Yuna praise him, Hajin thought, even her praise was quite painful, but he then decided not to care. Thanks to her, he could go to the route that Chae Nayun took. If today Sven really made a contract with Jin, Chae Nayun wouldn't be able to face him alone. If something happened to her, everything would be chaotic. He couldn't lose her, and they then entered the 6th branch. While walking in front of him, Jaden then grumbled, you attention-seeking freak. Hajin heard that, but he only told him to watch out for the monster in front. Jaden was then confused to hear that. He didn't even see anything. Hearing that, Hajin asked, couldn't he see it? There was a salamander in front. That might be the dungeon switch. A dungeon switch is an object or monster that reveals the full characteristics of a large dungeon. Jade could only be silent at his words. Kim Jingyu then asked, should he shoot the light arrow? Yona then invited him. Hearing his confirmation, Kim Jingyu then prepared his shot, and as his light arrow shot forward to illuminate the dark cave, they then finally saw the salamander that Hajin meant. It was a low intermediate rank level 6 monster. They were then surprised when they finally saw the monster. They immediately became alert. Jaden then told them all to form a fighting formation. He also asked them if anyone could issue a water element attack. Hajin thought, for now, he had to save it. Then, they had to do it in the usual way. Yona then came forward with her whip. After swinging it for a while, she then attacked the salamander using her whip attack, and when the salamander was about to attack them using the breath of fire coming out of its mouth was then forcibly closed by Yona using her whip. Taking advantage of that, Hazuki and Oh Sujong then jumped up and attacked towards the salamander. The combination of their attacks succeeded in overthrowing the salamander. After that, Yona then realized the dungeon changed. She then returned to preparing her attack. Seeing that, Hajin knew that it was the light of thundering. He wondered if Yuna had reached the verge of enlightenment. She was really impressive. Yona then said, they should keep moving. But as she walked forward, an attack suddenly rushed towards her. Luckily Hajin was able to quickly push her away. The other team members then shouted in surprise when they saw it. The position of the two of them was now very awkward. Hajin also realized it. Yona then immediately told him to let go. She was really very upset. Seeing that, Hajin then apologized to her, and when she was about to beat Hajin, they were both then confused when they heard calls from other team members. While looking at the thing that shot towards Yona earlier, they then asked questions. Where did this thing come from? Seeing that, Hajin thought, the threat of Jin, it was closer than I thought. Just now when he fell, a notification suddenly appeared. Poison arrow, neurotoxin has been implanted in the arrowhead. Somewhere in the dungeon, there was the sound of someone panting while carrying someone on her back. The person being carried was Sven. He looked very weak at the moment. He then apologized and told her to just leave him alone. Hearing that, Chae Nayun then irritably told him to be quiet. She told him to get up and run if he still had the strength to speak. She was also confused by what had just happened. There was no way this poison arrow was part of the training. Besides that, she was also confused. Chae Nayun then ran as hard as she could from the pursuit of the creature behind her. The monster resembled a golem made of lava. Seeing that, Chae Nayun was really confused why such a monster appeared in an artificial dungeon made for training. Inside the artificial dungeon, in the middle of a training session, Hajin's party seemed to be surrounded by a group of monsters called Peanut Flame at the moment. They were bombarded with breath attacks coming out of the mouth of the Peanut Flame. but fortunately, they had a reliable tank that could repel all attacks from the peanut flame. They also certainly wouldn't stand still when attacked. An archer would shoot at them from afar, while the fighters would attack the approaching peanut flames. The formation was quite successful as they managed to subvert the peanut flames without any casualties on their side. After who knows how long, they then finally managed to subvert the last peanut flame. Jaden wondered, here it was almost finished. Most of the monsters that appeared were peanut flames and salamanders, so this was easy. Apart from the arrow just now, he didn't see any other traps. He thought they could keep going. Hearing that made Hajin think, the arrow just now, even cadets with high perception couldn't notice it. Was this really a trap shown for the test? He was really confused. What the hell was that? But as they stepped forward, behind them, a spark suddenly appeared. Hajin realized it, and when he looked back, he then saw a salamander that was preparing its attack. The salamander looked like it was about to attack them using its fire breath. Hajin was then shocked to see it. He was surprised to see it alive. Shortly after, the salamander then released a very powerful breath of fire towards them. As the breath of fire approached, they then finally realized it. But when they could only be stunned at the attack, Hajin was then able to quickly react. He then changed the magic power of the stigma into a water barrier. The skill that came from his stigma actually managed to block the salamander's devastating attack. Steam spread everywhere due to the collision of fire and water, but the attack still couldn't break through Hajin's water barrier. The devastating attack seemed to consume all the remaining vitality of the salamander, but it really created such a powerful attack that it created a crater through which it passed. Even they could not wake up from their shock when they witnessed the attack. They had to wonder, was that really just a puppet? Was it a real fire breath? Even without touching it could make their skin scorched, and in the midst of their shock, Hajin was then surprised when Jaden suddenly called him. With a face full of anger, Jaden then grabbed him by the collar. He asked why he had been silent when he asked for a water attack. Hearing that, Hajin said that it was the effect of the magic gear he was wearing. But Jaden did not believe in his excuse. Seeing them who were arguing, Yuna then told them to stop. They should not waste time. After waking up from her shock, Oh Sujong then asked, what just now was a real monster and not a puppet of magic power, right? She was confused why such a monster was here. Hearing that, Yona explained, the environment here optimally imitated the original dungeon environment, so maybe the salamander evolved or maybe it appeared naturally. They had to get points for what just happened, so she then invited them to move. They agreed. Yona also thought, the magic gear might be fake. Hajin couldn't possibly buy that kind of item. Even he couldn't buy a desert eagle, but that made her even more confused. How could someone other than Kim Suho or Shin Jonghak be able to impart attributes to their magic power? He knew Mountain Tyrant's weakness. He could also impart attributes to his magic power, and the reason he hid all that. Yona then suddenly thought of Chae Nayun's words, who suspected that Hajin was a jinn. While glancing at him, she then put on a suspicious look. While Chae Nayun parties herself was now faced with an area full of lava in front of them, there was also a level 5 intermediate monster, Magma Golem. Seeing the monster made them think, what was the dungeon boss? Could they kill it? Chae Nayun replied, it was difficult if it was just their team. The other team would arrive soon, so she suggested they should work together with them. Until then, they had to continue to hide. They had to take care of Sven too. She was also still confused. Where did that arrow actually come from? Didn't it seem like the difficulty level of the training this time was very high? Hearing that made Sven very frustrated. He really apologized to them, because he was slightly scratched by the poison arrow. He became like this. He also frustratingly thought why he always ended up like this. Everything did not go his way since he entered the cube. This was very painful for him. Sven could not help but shed tears when thinking about his helplessness. But suddenly, a voice emerged from his head. The voice called him and asked if he wanted to get stronger. Sven was then confused about where the voice came from. The voice continued to influence him. Wasn't it always painful for him? He could give him strength. Sven seemed to be tempted when he heard that. An imaginary hand suddenly appeared in front of him. The voice continued, the price is cheap. Much cheaper than risking everything. Seeing the temptation to get stronger really made Sven unable to resist. He then said that he wanted to get stronger, and he then shook the hand. The voice replied, as you wish, and Sven was then swallowed by darkness with no way back. Sven suddenly screamed very loudly. It certainly surprised the people around him. Chae Nayun then asked, what happened to him? Seeing them who were even silent, Chae Nayun asked what they were doing. Chae then immediately told them to come here and hold Sven, but they were then surprised. When they saw the magma golem's head appear in front of them and stared at them, after detecting its prey, the magma golem then prepared its attack. It then flooded them using the lava liquid that came out of its mouth. They then panicked seeing it, and immediately fled from there.